what's up you guys? This is Bart coming to you from TST Industries in Florida with another episode of TST Garage. In the shop with me is a brand new Yamaha XSR 900, and today I'm presenting part one of our two-part series for the Fender Elimination components that we sell for this bike. In this episode, we'll be focusing only on the license plate bracket hardware and also the closeout hardware that mounts to the bike and enables you to mount your license plate light, and then subsequently signals onto the bike. Part two will focus on the actual signals, like you see here on the side, either our aftermarket signals or the remount kit for the OEM signals. And then we'll also tackle the license plate light wiring and mounting in that particular episode. So for this episode, we have this hardware in front of me. I'm going to present to you first the undertail closeout. We chose to finish it in a clear anodized finish for this particular bike because the bike comes with an undertail that is silver in color. We want to stay congruent to the design of the bike, so we went with the silver, and we also worked in the shapes that you see here on this closeout. They are very much following the body lines and the design language of this bike underneath. This also houses your trunk key or your seat latch key. We chose not to do a flapper cover like the OEM does, and for some other brand Fender Eliminators, they require you to reconfigure that latch. It's a pain in the butt. I've done it before. It requires the removal of the flapper and the pin that makes the hinge, and then spring can go flying and you have to go find it. We chose not to do that. The concept is to not have a bunch of water come off the tire and hit your lock itself, not to penetrate inside there and corrode those components. So the way we've designed this slot is off axis from the actual lock and also off angle. A lot of the water that may potentially get in gets slopped up and down and falls down under the bike. No big deal. As you can see, we chose not to have any hardware holes in this component. All of the mounting holes are on the inside and they are blind. They do not penetrate all the way through. They are threaded, so they will capture the threads of the fasteners right into this part. There's no need for nuts. You can actually run this as just the closeout set, which will close out the hole left behind by the removal of the fender. If you are running some other license plate bracket that you fabricated or found on the internet, maybe you're running some kind of a swing arm mount bracket, this will just close the hole and make it all nice and congruent with the rest of the bike. If you are running one of our systems, we have several different choices for you. We have the low mount, which has become sort of a customer favorite. The legality of using such a low mount system varies from place to place, so make sure you check out your local laws before you commit to buying it. The concept is you close out the hole left behind by the removal of the fender, you move your license plate down here, and it looks nice and smooth from the side and from the rear. It's a very smooth looking installation. On the other hand, if you want a rear mount where this whole big shovel comes off and you have your license plate basically under the taillight, we have two different versions of that. One is the slightly more economical standard version that does not allow any adjustability of the hanging angle. It comes with an intermediate bracket that fits in here and gets captured against the bottom of the bike and mounts to here. All the hardware is provided and it looks pretty sleek. It's very stealthy. It disappears behind the license plate, but if you prefer a slightly upgraded version, we do have our Elite-1 adjustable fender eliminator. Same concept of mounting. The difference is here we have fully CNC machined aluminum construction with black anodizing. It looks really cool. If you crack these screws loose, it enables you some adjustability to the angle of the license plate so that you have customizability. The previous bracket I introduced is made of stainless steel, so you won't have any rust issues. It is powder coated black to make it stealthy. These are the only components that contrast from the silver theme. Here we have stainless steel. Stainless steel, we chose to keep it raw, and we'll see how the market responds to that. Pretty much done yapping here. I'm really amped to show you guys the installation. This bike is actually really easy to work on, so that's gonna be a big asset to us. One thing I'd like to mention is that in the flow of this installation, I will be using blue thread locking compound, medium strength thread locking compound in certain steps. I suggest that you guys grab some of this for this installation so that your parts don't fall off after installation. All right, let's grab some tools. Let's push this to the side and let's start ripping this bike down. In step one, we'll remove the license plate off the bike. We are going to retain the hardware that is holding the license plate on. This will be reused on the TST setup. Next step will consist of removing the seat. And now up top here, we'll grab some tools and remove this bracket. Using a 5mm Allen, we will pull out these 4 fasteners, and then this bracket will come off. And the next step, we'll be removing the taillight lighting connectors, 2 signals, license plate light. Taillight can actually stay plugged in. We're just moving the taillight out of the way. For these connectors, you press this tab down, that unlocks the ratchet and permits you to remove it. Here we have a window that needs to clear a little ratchet. So we'll lift up on it and it comes out. Let's undo the routing. All right, good there. I'm gonna undo the routing of the taillight because we're gonna put the taillight here for the moment. What you see here is a little extra wiring loom that typically you don't see on the bike. We have our brake light modulator already installed on this bike. That's why the taillight's not going in here and you see the extra wires. No big deal. Now we have access to these 4 10mm nuts. They will have to come out. I'm going to remove the rear ones first so that I could move the taillight out of the way. Use a 10mm socket on these. And now I'm going to remove this one. As you can see, we have a little bit of looseness introduced into the fender assembly. Now I'm going to hold the fender and remove the last nut. Now the fender is pretty much ready to come down. There is this bracket that I'm just going to keep in place here because this will be reassembled in the reverse order. When the fender comes down, I just like to guide all the connectors through so I don't rip anything off. And that is pretty much the entire OEM component removal. We have one more thing here. There's a push pin. I'm gonna remove that. It's one of these guys. It sits in its locked position. You press in the center like so, and then you can back it out. This will not be reused. So we'll put that to the side and we'll grab some components and start the reassembly here. Since this video covers a multitude of installation setups, we're gonna go in segments. First segment will be the closeout kit only. It's the reinstallation of the closeout on here with all the other components back in place. Then we have the low mount version for Fender Eliminator, which shares the first steps I'm going to show you with just the closeout with the addition of this bracket. And then the last segment will be the rear mount license plate bracket set that will have its own flow. All right, so let's start with the closeout. Closeout comes to you with all the appropriate hardware. It's really just 4 screws. We will take the 2 shorter 12mm screws and put them in through the frame in the forward position. We'll grab a 4mm Allen and then bring the closeout into position and start those threads. I like to get these guys close to bottom but not fully snug. I want to have a little bit of adjustability here in this system. All right, the 4 fasteners that go into our Closeout would really benefit from having medium strength thread locking compound on them, so please make sure that you use some of that on the threads. Now, the bracket that I said we're going to retain goes back into position here. Make sure that the rubber bump-ons go down to the bottom of the frame, and then we bring our tail light back into position, align its mounting holes with this bracket, and then also underneath with the closeout. And then we're going to use the slightly longer M6 screws. These are 16 millimeters long. Get those threaded in. Again, leaving a little bit of adjustability is a good idea. All right, now that all the threads are engaged, let's see if this needs any adjustment. It really doesn't. It's good to go. So I'm going to go full tightness here. And again, I want to mention that we are just installing hardware today in this video. We're going to follow up with part 2 of this series to show you guys how to install all the lighting that comes off with the stock stuff. All right, this is now tight. I'm just going to reroute our taillight wiring the way it was routed previously. All right. Now that's good to go here. If you are only installing the closeout, then you put your seat on and the job is done. If you are running our low mount Fender Eliminator, I'm just gonna go through the next couple of steps to install that. I'm using a 5mm Allen here on these 2 screws. If our license plate bracket shows up to you with masking on the surface, just peel it off, wipe it off, and you're good to go. If not, you're okay to just proceed to this step. Fairly self-explanatory here. We just want to make sure that we don't scratch the surface of this aluminum under panel. So you want to hold your license plate bracket slightly away from that surface until you get those screws tightened up. And the screw holes on this bracket do have a little bit extra tolerance in them so that you can adjust if it's necessary. I mean, I don't think it's necessary in our case here. So I'm just gonna push down, tighten these guys up, and that'll be that. So if this is the extent of your installation, you would at this point put your license plate in place, bolt it in with the hardware you took off in step 1, put your seat on, and that would be that. For our purpose here, I'm going to take this off, take off the closeout, and then we'll restart the steps for the rear mount version installation for you guys to check out. The following steps will go over the requirements for the installation of our standard Elite-1 Fender Eliminator. For the rear mount, we have the intermediate bracket, we have our license plate bracket, and we have our closeout. First, we'll need to configure the license plate bracket onto the intermediate bracket. We are going to use the standard bracket underneath the intermediate bracket, get a screw through the top, get a washer from the bottom, and here we have locking nuts. They do have a nylon element in them, so no need for thread locking agents here. One recommendation I want to make here for all of these parts is that you do not dump out all the hardware into one pile. It's a lot easier to find your way through this installation if you treat all the hardware for the sub kits separately. So here we will have 3 pieces of hardware. The closeout comes with 4, and then it makes it very easy to deal with this. I'm going to grab a 10mm open-ended wrench or a box wrench here, and I'm going to get these fasteners here a little bit tighter do not want to go all the way to the bottom just yet. I want to leave a little bit of adjustability as always. All right, still have a little bit of adjustability, but it's not sloppy anymore. We'll grab our closeout, flip it over. So you can see here we have wiring passages, we have the space for your latch, key access, and then you have a water channel that gets rid of excess water that may end up in here. There's a cutout here towards the rear that houses the intermediate bracket. So the idea here is once we screw it onto the frame, this gets clamped in between. If you were to be running wires through here, and after watching the second episode of this series, you may actually want to just take notice of how the stack of the hardware comes together while still leaving you passages for all the wires. You'll need to consider that while you are running those wires. All right, so we're back in this place here. We have lined up the 4 holes from the fender. Again, 12mm shorter screws from the closeout set go towards the front of the bike. And I'm gonna get those in first, get them aligned, get that thread started. I'm not showing you guys the application of the thread locking compound. That is just being flashed on the screen for you. So I got them down close to the bottom, left a little bit of adjustability. Again, you don't want to be moving this around too much because you're going to tear up the surface of your nice silver cover underneath. At this point, we have our setup here attached to the bike. It's still a little bit loose, but we still have access to these screws here that does get eliminated once we put the taillight on. So let's make sure that this guy's sitting even side to side, and I'm gonna push it towards the front of the bike. I'm just gonna tighten up on these screw connections, ensuring that it stays in place. There we go. All right, and at this point, I'm gonna grab the taillight damping bracket. I'm gonna put it on the same way it was from the factory with the bump-on pads down towards the bottom of the bike. Bring the taillight back into position. Grab the longer screws that came with the closeout set. These are the 16mm long M6 screws. Once the taillight is back in place, I'm going to align all the holes. Drop my screw through here and start the threads. Repeat on the other side of the bike. All right, now I have all the hardware in. We'll go to full tightness here on all of these fasteners. Reroute the taillight wiring the way it was routed originally. If you purchased the adjustable version of the Elite-1 Fender Eliminator from us, this is what's showing up to your door. You have your closeout set with its hardware, you have your intermediate bracket, and you have your adjustable license plate bracket that couples with this bracket to be mounted onto the closeout and subsequently onto the bike. We'll use these parts a little bit later, so let's scoop them to the side. These parts build your adjustable setup. These two 12mm long M6 screws mount this setup to the intermediate bracket. I'm going to push those to the side first, and I'm going to arrange these parts into how I'm going to assemble them. You have your hinge brackets that do have a smaller curvature and a flat to a larger curvature. I use this small dimple, smaller curvature to go towards the rear of the bike. So I'm going to arrange them like this. Then we have these brackets. You could arrange them like this or like this. Obviously, we want the license plate to be sloping down and towards the rear. So this is how we are going to arrange these brackets. This will enable us to have the license plate swooping down like I explained. So I'm going to do this way for you guys so you get a better view with perspective. You have little flange nuts with nylock locking elements that go behind this bracket. And then we have these countersunk screws that go in front through this bracket, into that nut. And then we have these M6 12mm long button head screws that get a washer on them, and these screw the L bracket into our hinge. I'll demonstrate that now. The hinge does have a protruding boss that centers itself in the hole here. So once you get these together, they're already hinged. All you're doing is locking that connection in with a screw. These screws will use a 4mm Allen. Before I get it down to the bottom, I make sure to recenter the L bracket on the hinge. We have this little sub-assembly. I'm going to perform the same steps to this side. For my demonstration, I'm not using thread locking compound. For your installation, guys, I recommend putting thread lock in here and also into the hinge connection. Those are places where we don't have locking elements in the hardware. The nuts here will establish the lock on the screws for this connection here. Use the middle screw hole here and here. Cap that off with the little nut. I'm going to use an 8mm open-ended or box wrench here with a 3mm hex or Allen here. Get this snug, but not all the way down to the bottom. I'm going to leave adjustability as always. Repeat these steps. All right, now we go through a little check, make sure that our configuration matches what I just explained. When you hold this setup like this, it should be sloping down with the bottom of the license plate out far away from the bike towards the ground. You should have the smaller curvature, little fillet here towards the rear of the bike, and that's pretty much good to go. If your configuration does not look like this, please back up and restart it and make sure that you're at this place. Now, we'll bring the intermediate bracket into view. Top side of the closeout is the non-cosmetic side. It does have the cutout here for our bracket. Now we'll just need to make sure to attach this sub-assembly to this bracket. For that purpose, we have these screws. They do receive 4mm Allen. Okay, now I have everything loosely attached. I'm going to just make sure that I take up some of the slop and I don't have a lot of movement. We don't want sloppiness, but we do want adjustability. Once we get this thing thrown on the bike, that's when we'll do final adjust and everything. Okay. That looks pretty good for my purpose. I'm going to grab these parts, we'll jump on the bike, and then we'll continue there. All right, back on the bike now. We'll grab our closeout and also our pre-configured license plate bracket. Top side of the closeout exposes all the channels in here. This intermediate bracket only has one way to fit. If you are running license plate light and or signals through this setup, please halt here and use the instructions from our second part video. If you are not, here we go. Get this back in place, align the forward-most holes, grab two smaller, shorter screws, 12mm long screws from our closeout set, get them centered in the holes with the threads. Use thread locking agent, get the threads engaged, get Get these fasteners close to the bottom, but leave some adjustability. And now that we've taken out the slop and we still have some adjustability here, we still have access to the top, what we're gonna do is grab 10mm open-ended, hold the hinge. You wanna make sure that the hinges are parallel to each other and also parallel to the center plane of the bike. Hold that in place, 4mm Allen from the top. We're gonna lock down on these hinges. Now if you get them not parallel, you will immediately know when you go to adjust your angle because it won't swing fully. So let's do that now. Not actually really adjusting anything. I'm just gonna check it. We have free range of motion, we're good to go. This can be fine adjusted and finely tuned after the bike's already reassembled. So we're just gonna put it back in place here. Let's grab the bracket with the damping bump-ons for the taillight. Let's grab the taillight. We are going to grab the longer screws from our closeout set and drop them into the rearmost holes here. Again, good idea to use medium strength thread locking agent here. Other screw. And at this point, if all your components are looking good where they are, let's go ahead and lock down on all of these connections, full tightness. If you're a torque spec kind of guy, I recommend 8.8 to 9 foot-pounds of torque on four of these fasteners here. I'm gonna reroute the wire, the tail light back how it was from the factory. And now, at this point, we still have a little bit of adjustability here. We should probably do something about that. 3mm Allen, 8mm box wrench. I am going to loosen these guys up a little bit, make sure that they are hanging center. Now my license plate bracket is center. I'm gonna lock down on it fully. It's looking good. I'm gonna grab my license plate and hardware. If you don't have license plate hardware, you can pick that up on our website. We have these reflective bolt sets. We also have anodized screw sets that we offer in several different colors. For this particular bike, I'll probably choose either gold to match the rims or blue. I do have a sample here. It does have a stainless screw going through it and then an anodized washer. They look kind of cool. It's up to you. The license plate is on. We're actually going to be able to tune that angle. Now, we give you the freedom to adjust it however you want, but you have to exercise that freedom carefully. Make sure that you don't end up with the bottom of your license plate within the range of travel for the rear tire. Now on our standard setup, we did bend this bracket on an angle that keeps your license plate safe. This is an American, North American license plate size. In Europe, you guys have, license plates that look like street signs, so all bets are off there. This is probably something you're gonna have to play with the angle of, make sure that you are not within that tire travel. This right here, that's really bad. I'm gonna approximate the angle that I have here just to show you. Obviously, if you are playing with different angles, you will have to experiment and make sure you're good, and that is up to you. I'll lock down on this, and then I'm gonna proceed to the reverse order of disassembly for the remaining components. That really just involves putting on the seat latch bracket with its hardware using a 5mm Allen, and then replacing the seat, and that's pretty much that. I wouldn't necessarily take this bike out on the road just yet. We do not have signals on it. If you live in an area where arm signals are good enough, I guess you could probably be all right. pretty much it. And we are done with episode 1. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this informative. If you like anything you see here, check out tstindustries.com. We have these parts ready to be packaged up and sent to your home for you to enjoy this installation on your bike. If you are ready for episode 2, we have that out on our YouTube channel and also tstindustries.com. In that video, you'll see the installation procedures for the different types of signaling systems and license plate light that we offer for this setup. Hit like and subscribe, and hopefully we'll see you in the next one. Ride safe. Later.